They pulled her from a car like she didn't matter, like her existence was a threat, not a presence. No badge, no uniform, no weapons. Just skin too dark for their comfort and eyes too steady to break. On that forgotten stretch of asphalt, under the heat of a fading sun and the weight of a badge misused, they thought they had control. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. Not yet. This isn't just another story about injustice. It's the reckoning that followed. In a world where power is often confused with authority, where silence is demanded and obedience expected, one woman refused to kneel. Before you find out who she really is, before you learn what she's capable of, ask yourself this. What happens when the person you try to break is the one trained to fight wars you'll never understand? This is not fiction. This is what happens when truth has rank and history has receipts. Like, subscribe, comment where you're watching from, and tell us, how do you think this ends? Gr. Maya Sterling adjusted her glasses and glanced at the digital clock on her dashboard. 7:42 a.m. The morning sun filtered through the windshield of her black Audi, casting long, golden shadows across the Tulane country road. Her navigation system whispered directions in a calm, British accent as she made her way toward a prestigious policy summit in Washington, D.C. Her keynote on economic disparity had already drawn global attention. Yale had posted it on their front page 2 days ago. She wore a sharp navy pantsuit, her curly hair pulled into a low bun, and a lanyard with her Yale ID tucked just beneath her blazer. Her mind was already reviewing the opening line of her speech when the red and blue lights exploded in her rearview mirror. Maya's eyes narrowed, confusion rising. She hadn't been speeding. Her signal use was flawless. She slowed down and pulled to the shoulder, shifting the car into park. Her hands instinctively stayed on the wheel. Calm, controlled, predictable. The patrol car behind her came to a slow, deliberate stop. Dust lifted in soft swirls as a tall, heavy-set officer stepped out. Boots hit gravel. Sunglasses reflected sky. His gait oozed something Maya had seen before, not confidence, but entitlement. He approached with one hand resting on his holster. "License and registration," he barked, not even looking at her face yet. Maya nodded slowly, careful, deliberate, handing over the documents. "Officer, may I ask why I'm being stopped?" she said, her tone even. The man finally looked up, his eyes scanning her. Something in his expression shifted. The way his brows twitched, the slight curl of his lip. He glanced at her ID. "Sterling, huh? Where you headed, Miss Sterling?" "It's Doctor," she corrected gently. "Dr. Maya Sterling. I'm en route to Washington, D.C. to deliver a keynote address." She held his stare. The officer's jaw flexed. "You're a doctor?" "A Ph.D. in economic policy," she said calmly. "I'm a professor at Yale University." "Yale." He repeated it like a bad joke. He turned the license over, glanced at the registration. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." "Excuse me." Now, his hand dropped to his belt, just grazing the baton. Maya took a breath, unbuckled her seatbelt, and stepped out with controlled grace. She stood straight, hands visible. The chill of the rural morning nipped through her blazer. "Am I being detained?" she asked, voice steady. "We've had reports of a stolen black Audi registered out of state." "You fit the profile," he said, without blinking. "That's absurd," she replied. "You have my license, registration, and—" "Turn around. Hands behind your back." The cuffs clicked too tight, like punctuation to a sentence she'd heard too many times in history books. The trip to the Grayson County Sheriff's Office was short, but the silence inside the cruiser was longer than any road. Maya stared forward, her expression unreadable, her mind already filing everything. The timestamp, the badge number, the angle of his dashcam. At the station, she was walked through processing by another officer, silent, young, nervous. They took her phone, her wallet, and placed her in a plain interrogation room with a buzzing overhead light. She sat at the metal table, back straight, hands folded. The door opened. The original officer returned, Deputy Kyle Harmon, according to his tag. "You can make one call," he said flatly, placing her phone on the table. "I'll be outside." "Thank you." she said, meeting his eyes. Something in her gaze made him shift uncomfortably. She waited until the door clicked shut. Then she reached for the phone. She tapped the screen, opened a secure folder, and scrolled through the list of unlabeled contacts. No names, no identifiers, just numbers and protocols. Her finger stopped on a single entry titled Directive 7. She hesitated for exactly half a second, then tapped it. The call rang once. Then a mechanical voice answered, "Confirm. Sterling, Gamma 4. A pause. Then, proceed." She leaned in, her voice calm, deliberate. "Activate Black Swan Protocol. Priority override." Another pause. "Acknowledged." Click. The line went dead. She placed the phone down gently, exhaled, and looked up at the flickering light. That was all it would take. The screen on Maya's phone went black after the call, its silence louder than words. She sat back in the stiff metal chair, posture still immaculate, as if she'd never been cuffed, never been handled like a suspect. Her expression betrayed nothing. No anger, no tension, just precision. Inside the concrete walls of Grayson County Sheriff's Office, the clock ticked loud and slow. Time inched forward, but outside, the world was already shifting. 4 states away, inside the data nexus of Wacth Global's internal emergency command system, a digital alert flickered red. Priority 1. Directive 7 triggered. The name that accompanied it required no authentication. Sterling Maya. The system bypassed protocols, fired automatic pings through encrypted channels, and within minutes, the alert reached 3 of the most secure terminals in the country. One at Wacth's Manhattan Crisis Unit, one at an unlisted Homeland Security node in Arlington, and one on the personal tablet of Governor Alan Voss of Virginia. In New York, the automated system forced a priority meeting into the calendars of Wacth's Black Section, a strategic shadow cell used only in scenarios marked non-recoverable without external override. No sirens, no alarms, just one notification on each tablet. Sterling, Tier 1 breach. Location, Grayson County, VA. Immediate containment recommended. The analysts barely blinked. One of them, a veteran operative named Halden, stood, turned toward the private conference line, and called a number that didn't exist on public telecom grids. "Governor Voss, asset Sterling has been compromised by local enforcement. Orders." At 8:23 a.m., Governor Voss was in his office in Richmond, sipping black coffee and skimming energy policy briefs, when his secured line rang. He recognized the origin code instantly and answered before the second ring. The voice on the other end didn't ask for permission. It told him what had happened. Grayson County. Traffic stop. Detainment in violation of federal protocols. Sterling. He nearly dropped the mug. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Has it escalated?" "Not yet," the voice said. "You have 5 minutes before it does." Voss didn't hesitate. He slammed a button on his desk phone and called the direct line to Grayson Sheriff Station. Deputy Kyle Harmon picked up, slow and casual. "Grayson Sheriff's Department, Harmon speaking. This is Governor Alan Voss," the voice snapped. "You're currently holding DR. Maya Sterling in your custody. She is to be released immediately, and your department is to log no further action on this case." Harmon's eyes widened, his posture stiffening. Yes, sir. I'll notify the sheriff." But he didn't move. Not right away. Because across the room, leaning against a filing cabinet with a smirk on his face, stood Sheriff Joe Martin. He'd overheard the name. "Maya Sterling," Martin repeated, slow and suspicious. "That, the lady we got in holding?" Harmon nodded once. "Governor says to let her go. No further records. No ID on her. No military tag. Just some Yale story and an attitude," Martin said with a grunt. "Governor don't know the half of it." Harmon hesitated. "Sir, that call was real." "I'm sure it was," Martin replied, pushing off the cabinet. "But around here, we don't release people just because someone big says boo. Not unless we see something worth shaking over." He turned toward the hallway, the smirk still there. "Let's give it a couple hours. If they're serious, they'll show up in person." Back in the holding room, Maya sat unmoving. She knew exactly how long it would take for the signal to reach its intended targets. She had calculated it to the second. The waiting wasn't impatience, it was confirmation. If they were following protocol, a ripple would already be underway. She didn't need them to show up yet. She needed to know who would resist first. The silence beyond the door told her everything. In Richmond, Governor Voss paced his office, redialing the station. No answer. He sent a dispatch order to the State Patrol HQ, marked confidential, but he already knew. Sheriff Martin wasn't going to comply quietly. Voss couldn't send in a team without making national headlines. Not yet. He picked up his encrypted line again. "Get me Commander Hensley. Full alert. Quiet mobilization. Grayson's not releasing her." Meanwhile, Sheriff Martin opened the door to the holding room. Maya turned her head, meeting his eyes without rising. "Good morning again," he said, casual. "Seems you've got some pretty powerful friends." "It's not the friends that matter," Maya replied evenly. "It's the protocol." "Is that what you call it?" he asked, stepping further into the room. "Protocol." He folded his arms. "Well, I call it suspicious behavior. No federal ID, no credentials. Just a big attitude and a fancy car with plates out of state." "You've already been told to release me," she said. "And you've ignored it." "I've been asked," he corrected, "not ordered." Maya tilted her head slightly. "This is going to cost you." Martin laughed. "Lady, I've been doing this for 30 years. You think I'm scared of a call from a capital?" He moved closer. "I don't know who you are, but you don't just show up here acting like the world answers to you." "They don't," Maya said softly, "but someone much higher than you does." He stared at her for a long moment, then walked out without another word. The door locked with a loud click. 10 feet away, Deputy Harmon stared at the red light blinking on the secure line. He looked at the fax marked urgent. "Federal Noncompliance Report Asset Sterling, time-stamped 5 minutes ago," and swallowed hard. "Sir," he called after the sheriff, "I think we're pushing this too far." "If she's real, they'll come," Martin said without turning around. "If not, we'll have her confession by lunch." The hours ticked by with mechanical precision, each second falling heavier than the last, as Maya sat silently in the holding cell. The room was cold, dimly lit, and intentionally barren. Concrete bench, metal toilet, single flickering light in the corner, and the hum of electricity that never quite faded. Sheriff Martin hadn't returned since his last smug warning. No food had been offered, no explanation provided, and yet Maya remained completely composed. Her eyes scanned the room not in panic, but in quiet calculation. From the moment she had stepped in, she had begun mapping the dimensions, tracing the ceiling's molding with her gaze, noting the rusted vent in the corner, and the subtle red lens hidden inside the faux sprinkler head. Camera 1. The room had at least 2 more. The small indentations in the grout told her where the audio mics were embedded. She knew these tactics. Cheap surveillance, tech used in facilities too underfunded for discretion and too arrogant to think anyone would notice. Her restraints had been swapped out for heavier cuffs, clamped just tight enough to dig into skin, but not tight enough to break it. A message. But messages could be sent in both directions. At 11:14 p.m., the hallway outside her cell echoed with a burst of laughter. Deputies on night shift, young, tired, and more curious than alert, took turns glancing at the monitor just outside the door. "She hasn't moved in hours," one of them mumbled. "Creepy calm man. Like, she's waiting for something." "Sheriff says she's bluffing," another shrugged. "Some rich chick trying to play federal." "Governor called though," the first one whispered. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," the second muttered. "And Sheriff still told them to pound sand. Balls of steel, or just dumb as hell, I don't know." Inside the cell, Maya gently tilted her wrist, adjusting her posture just enough to ease pressure on the nerves while keeping the movement subtle. She slipped her thumb toward her blazer's internal lining, retrieved earlier from the evidence bag after processing, and felt for the small reinforced stitch she had added months ago. The thread was slightly thicker there, waxed and double-knotted. She pressed against it until it gave, revealing a concealed pin no longer than an inch. It wasn't made of steel. It was carbon-forged titanium, matte black, non-magnetic. What most people would call a hairpin. What Maya called contingency. She held it between her fingers for 5 seconds, counting the camera's scan rotation in her peripheral vision. When the red blink turned away, she moved. Quick, precise, no wasted effort. She inserted the pin into the lock on her left wrist cuff, twisted once, twice, pause, third click, full rotation. The cuff popped with a soft metallic snick. She repeated the motion for her right wrist, slower this time, compensating for the awkward angle. In 22 seconds, both cuffs lay on the bench beside her. She didn't toss them or hide them. She simply folded her hands again and waited. She had no intention of escaping, because if the system was watching, she wanted them to know that she had the ability to free herself at any moment, that their containment was a choice she allowed, not a reality they controlled. Maya leaned her head back against the wall and exhaled slowly. The night was quiet, but not silent. Somewhere in the distance, a generator clicked on. Another light buzzed and hummed. Somewhere deeper in the station, Sheriff Martin poured himself a glass of scotch in his office, feet on the desk, watching local news cycle through reruns. He still believed he had time. He didn't know that time was already working against him. At 2:06 a.m., a signal pinged from the county cell tower. Encrypted traffic. Untraceable origin. The station's internet router flickered twice before resetting itself. The building's external security system rebooted, and all 10 active camera feeds throughout the holding areas went dark for exactly 9 seconds. Just long enough for every surveillance record from the past 8 hours to be silently uploaded, duplicated, and rerouted to a secure off-site network hundreds of miles away. The system restored itself without an alert. No alarms, no pop-ups. Business as usual. By 3:12 a.m., Maya remained perfectly still. She had adjusted her breathing, keeping her pulse even, conserving energy. She was well acquainted with discomfort. Her time abroad during crisis briefings and deep state negotiations had taught her the value of silence. But she also knew how to weaponize waiting. Every minute she remained in that cell was another inch Martin was burying himself under scrutiny. She wasn't going to fight her way out. She was going to let the weight of her presence collapse the system around him. At 5:07 a.m., the early shift deputies returned. One of them paused in front of the monitor, frowning. "Did someone uncuff her?" he asked, tapping a screen. The other leaned in. "What the hell? We didn't open the door." "Sheriff needs to see this," the first one said, already reaching for the intercom. But Martin had already seen it. He was standing in the shadows of the corridor, arms crossed, watching Maya through the cell's thick glass. His face was unreadable, half fury, half disbelief. He didn't say a word. Maya turned her head slowly toward the window and met his stare dead on. The cuffs lay neatly beside her on the bench. She didn't smile, didn't move, just looked, long enough for Martin to feel the sting of his mistake settle into his gut, long enough for him to understand that whatever came next, he was no longer in control. Deputy Harmon was already jittery when he arrived for morning rotation, clutching a coffee he didn't remember brewing. The hallway monitors showed Maya sitting calmly in her cell, untouched, uncuffed, unmoved. The cuffs still lay neatly on the bench beside her, just as they had for hours. A silent message, glowing like a fuse yet to be lit. Harmon stared at the screen, his gut tight with dread. The governor had called, then silence. The servers had flickered at dawn, but the IT system showed no alert. And now she was still sitting there, waiting. Across the building, Sheriff Martin stood near the main desk, eyes locked on the surveillance wall. His jaw clenched. His pride was a ticking time bomb, and deep down he knew it. Something was coming. At 7:42 a.m., the front gate camera caught the first glimpse. A matte black SUV rolling in, no tags, tinted windows, followed by 2 identical vehicles that glided into the parking lot without sound, synchronized with eerie precision. Deputies stopped mid-conversation. The station fell silent. Martin stepped to the window as the passenger door of the lead vehicle opened, and a woman in a fitted slate gray suit emerged, her movements sharp, deliberate, and without hesitation. Behind her, 2 men exited the second SUV, their demeanor unmistakably federal. Clean lines, discreet earpieces, black folders under one arm, and tactical readiness in their posture. "Who the hell are these people?" Martin muttered, pushing through the entrance as the group approached. The woman at the front didn't wait to be addressed. "Sheriff Joseph Martin?" she asked, voice clipped and efficient. "I'm Special Counsel Lydia Veer, Department of Federal Oversight. These are Agents Connors and Lee from Internal Enforcement Division. We're here on behalf of Executive Asset Classification Tier 1, Code, Sterling Protocol." Martin frowned, not comprehending. "Sterling what?" "Your facility is an unlawful possession of Maya Sterling," Veer said. "You are in direct violation of federal protective clauses surrounding embedded civilian assets with diplomatic equities. Effective immediately, we are asserting jurisdiction." Martin's nostrils flared. "You don't have the authority to just barge in here." "Sir, if I had come to ask permission, I would have called," Veer said. "I didn't, because this isn't a request." She handed him a slim black envelope marked with a seal Martin had never seen before. His fingers hesitated. "This is a mistake," he grumbled. "She never showed ID. No documentation. She refused to cooperate." "She didn't need to," Veer replied. "She's a protected name. You never had jurisdiction." Before Martin could reply, the doors to the office opened again, and the man who stepped inside wore no badge, but carried more weight than any uniform. He was tall, late 50s, skin like sun-worn copper, and eyes that missed nothing. He handed Veer a single manila folder and turned to Martin with a look that could have frozen stone. "We've reviewed your intake process, your logs, your surveillance archives, and your holding protocol. You're about to have a very long week." Martin blinked. "And you are?" "Doesn't matter," the man said. "What matters is what you've done." In the holding cell, Maya stood calmly as the door opened. Agent Connors stepped in first, followed by Veer. They didn't speak until they'd confirmed the room was secure. "Colonel Sterling," Veer said. "Apologies for the delay. Retrieval Team Alpha arrived as soon as clearance stabilized." Maya gave a small nod, her voice cool. Timing was anticipated. "Has the board been briefed?" "As of 0700, Veer said. "Horvath Holdings is fully mobilized. The Black Room convened. You've been upgraded to executive lead status." "Good," Maya said. "And the digital breach?" "Extracted, documented, rerouted. All footage is now mirrored in 3 federal archives and 2 off-grid storage sites. The sheriff and his deputies are currently unaware that their entire system was penetrated at 0200 hours." Maya retrieved her blazer, straightened it with one smooth motion, and followed them out. In the hallway, every deputy stared as she passed, not as a suspect, but as a question they couldn't answer. Martin stood rooted in place, fists clenched at his sides as Maya met his gaze directly. "You asked who I am," she said calmly. "Let me answer that now." She reached into her inside pocket, revealing a minimalist ID card embedded with a living circuit. The chip glowed faintly. Across its face, the words Executive Clearance, Tier 1 Alpha Access shimmered above a name, Maya Horvath Sterling. Martin's eyes widened as realization struck. The last name, Horvath, wasn't just recognizable. It was untouchable. The Horvath family controlled banking corridors from Zurich to Singapore. They had satellites. They had proxies. They had entire governments on speed dial. And this woman, the one he'd kept in a cell, had just reminded him that he'd tried to cage the storm. Behind her, Agent Lee handed Martin a sealed packet. "These are copies of the dashcam recordings, audio transcripts from the booking room, and video evidence collected from your internal feeds. They have been preserved in chain of custody format and entered into review under Title IX oversight. As of now, you are under federal investigation for procedural misconduct and unlawful detainment of a protected federal asset. You may want to contact legal counsel." "I was just doing my job," Martin said, voice low, desperate now. "I didn't know, and that's exactly the problem," Maya replied, stepping past him. "You didn't ask. You assumed. And you were wrong." The caravan of black SUVs pulled away from the Grayson County Sheriff's Office with precision, engines low and steady, tires humming softly against the asphalt. Inside the lead vehicle, Maya sat in silence, her eyes fixed out the window, the passing trees blurring into green and gold streaks. The digital tablet in her lap displayed a real-time feed of data flowing from the Department of Oversight. Sheriff Martin's personnel files, financial records, internal complaints, all compiling into a legal matrix that would soon consume him. But Maya wasn't focused on Martin anymore. Not entirely. She was thinking of a different file, one that no network could access because it predated networks, predating even her own classified clearance. She turned to Agent Veer. "We're making a stop," she said. 15 miles west. Town called Carson Point. "I'll go alone." Veer frowned. "Colonel, we're on Protocol Alpha. Deviations require clearance." "This one is personal," Maya replied. "I won't be long." Veer didn't argue. She just tapped her comms and relayed the adjustment. 15 minutes later, Maya stepped out alone onto the cracked pavement of a forgotten main street. Carson Point was small, sleepy, almost frozen in time. The paint peeled from old storefronts. A barbershop sign swung gently in the wind. She walked with purpose, her heels clicking against stone as she turned the corner and found the building she remembered only through whispered stories. Carson Public Archives. It wasn't much more than a converted firehouse, its doors faded red, its sign half shattered. But Maya knew exactly what it was. Inside, the air was thick with dust and time. An old man sat behind the counter, his reading glasses slipping down his nose, a radio humming softly beside him. He looked up but didn't speak. He didn't need to. Maya nodded once and moved past him, heading straight for the basement steps. The concrete staircase creaked under her weight, the light above flickering once before stabilizing. She remembered her father's words, spoken in confidence when she was barely 13. "If anything happens to me, go to Carson. There's a ledger in the basement archive. Room B4. It's older than Horvath, older than our name." At the time, she hadn't understood. Now she did. She reached the metal vault door, entered the manual code etched long ago into her memory, and stepped inside. The archive room was cold, lined with filing cabinets and old box shelves, lit only by a single exposed bulb dangling from a ceiling. She walked past rows of forgotten records until she found what she was looking for, a black-bound ledger with the initials RJH embossed on the spine. Her fingers paused on the cover. Roderick James Halden, her father's closest friend. The man who disappeared in 2005 under circumstances never resolved. The man who had helped build Horvath Holdings from its earliest conception, long before it became a global monolith. She opened the book. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, meeting minutes, schematics, old memos, all leading to one unspoken truth. The rise of Horvath Holdings had not been organic. It had been guided, manipulated from within, and someone in law enforcement had been involved in eliminating key dissenters. Maya turned to a page marked with a red ink X. It was a case file, local jurisdiction, Grayson County, 2005. Victim, R.J. Halden. Status, missing. Last seen at Martin's property. Sheriff Martin, then just a deputy, had signed the last incident report. No follow-up, no investigation, no closure. Her jaw tightened. She turned the page again and found a grainy photo, paper clipped to the margin. It showed Halden standing next to her father and a younger Martin, all three at what appeared to be the groundbreaking ceremony of a data facility, one Maya had never known existed. The photo was dated April 17, 2004, 1 year before Halden vanished. At the bottom, a note in her father's handwriting. "Don't trust Joe. He's already chosen his side." Maya closed the ledger, her heartbeat steady but heavy. This wasn't just about power abuse anymore. This was personal. Martin hadn't just profiled her. He had history with her family. Buried history. She returned the book to its shelf, knowing the digital scans Veer had commissioned would make it to the right hands. But this physical evidence mattered more. It grounded the truth. It connected the dots. Back upstairs, the old man behind the desk didn't say a word as she walked past. He gave her a small nod, the kind reserved for those who remembered, those who returned. Maya exited the building, the morning sun now fully risen, the shadows of the past shrinking under its weight. She walked back toward the SUVs waiting at the edge of town. Veer met her halfway. "Everything all right, Colonel?" she asked. Maya nodded. "Better than all right. We just got the missing piece." As the SUV slid back onto the highway, Maya sat in the back seat, the weight of the black ledger still fresh in her mind, its pages etched into her memory with the clarity of a wound finally reopened. Agent Veer rode silent beside her, eyes flicking between her tablet and the road ahead, not asking questions because she already sensed a change. Maya wasn't just gathering information anymore. She was preparing to strike. She tapped a series of commands into her secure comms unit, navigating to a private interface most people didn't even know existed. The screen flashed a single symbol, an 8-pointed shield overlaid by a broken hourglass. The aegis. Formed in secret by her father during the early days of Wacth, it had never appeared on any official roster, not even internal security briefings. It was a last resort failsafe, an autonomous network of operatives, analysts, and digital savants scattered across jurisdictions, corporations, and even governments, built for one purpose: uncover the truth when no one else would. Maya selected the line tagged Aegis 03 Lucian. The call connected through 12 encrypted nodes before a voice answered. Male calm and dry like gravel over silk. "I was wondering when you'd use this channel again." "We have a breach," Maya said. "Full spectrum. Grayson wasn't just about me. It was legacy suppression. I found the Halden file." A pause. Then, "Confirm provenance. Signed by my father. Photographic timestamp April 17, 2004. Martin was there. R.J. went missing less than a year later." Location: Carson Point Archives. Physical only. I've uploaded the scans. Veracity rated 94% minimum. Understood. Initiating protocol Tidewake. She knew what that meant. The Aegis didn't just investigate. They dismantled. Within seconds, Lucian's team began activating dormant connections, former military analysts, whistleblower contacts, deep net surveillance nodes, all pointed now toward one directive: reconstruct the Halden disappearance and trace every known link to Grayson County's law enforcement network from 2003 to 2007. Maya switched lines. Patch in Aegis 07, Sora. Use bypass key Trinity Flux. The second line clicked open, revealing a soft, deliberate female voice with a British accent sharpened by steel. "I'm listening. I need a threat matrix built around Sheriff Martin and any internal law enforcement actions that intersect with Horvath's expansion phase, 2001-2006. Includes sealed indictments, whistleblower terminations, and off-the-record transfers." "You're expecting an inside leak?" "No. I'm expecting a buried operation. Someone didn't want Halden's influence carried forward." Sora's keys began tapping in the background as she accessed ghost directories buried under layers of government fog. "There's chatter," she said a moment later. "Low-frequency data echoes from a shell company connected to pre-merger Horvath. It lists Martin as a contractor on private security audits in 2003. Nothing logged formally. But here's the interesting part. The same company filed closure paperwork 3 weeks after Halden vanished. No fiscal trace. It vanished overnight." Maya's jaw tightened. "I want every name associated with that paper trail and their current locations. If they're alive, I want to know what they're afraid of. If they're dead, I want to know who signed the death certificate." Lucian broken again. "We're mapping Grayson's law enforcement chain. Internal files from that era show 2 other deputies reassigned post 2005. One found dead in a hunting accident 6 months later. The other institutionalized after claiming he was being followed. Official records sealed by county order." "What about the land registry?" Maya asked. "Wasn't there a facility mentioned in the photo?" "Already cross-referencing. That property was filed under Horvath Infrastructure Development LLC, an early front shell. The permit listed a data analysis substation, but satellite scans show no building ever erected." "Because it wasn't for analysis," Maya said. "It was for storage. Off-books asset warehousing." The SUV continued west as Maya leaned back, mind processing faster than her pulse. This wasn't about a single injustice. It was a network, threads woven through time, camouflaged by bureaucracy and the assumption that no one would ever come looking. But Maya was no longer looking. She was unearthing, exposing, correcting. "Sora," she said, "issue trace protocols across all archival servers flagged under Horvath black sites. I want data tags matched to R.J, Halden's signature, and any cryptographic markers from the original Horvath codebase." "That'll trip alerts," Sora warned. "They'll know someone's inside." "Good," Maya said coldly. "Let them know I'm awake." By late afternoon, the Aegis had assembled a preliminary chart. 10 names, 8 alive, 2 dead under suspicious circumstances. All had touched some part of Halden's final months: financial transfers, facility sign-offs, internal memos quietly scrubbed. Maya scanned each face, committing them to memory. One in particular stood out, a man named Ellis Rourke, now living under a new name in Montana. He had once overseen Horvath's regional logistics before resigning abruptly in 2006. The Aegis flagged him as high-value target with probable legacy knowledge. Maya tapped the file. "Locate and surveil. Passive for now." Veer glanced over from her seat. "Orders." Maya closed the tablet. "We just reactivated a ghost case they thought would stay buried. Martin is the first thread, but he's not the center. We're going to pull until the whole thing unravels." "And when it does?" Veer asked. Maya's voice didn't waver. "Then we expose the ones who buried Halden, and make sure none of them bury anyone else again." The private elevator hummed as it ascended toward the upper floors of Horvath Tower, each passing level drawing Maya closer to the inner sanctum of the empire her family had built, now partially compromised. She stood with Agent Veer and 2 silent security liaisons behind her, all dressed in regulation gray. Her fingers curled around the edge of her encrypted tablet, the screen pulsing with a flashing red glyph. "Internal breach detected, node origin. Horvath primary core." That was the alarm the Aegis had uncovered only 30 minutes ago. A hidden set of subroutines buried deep within Horvath's internal analytics system, redirecting all inquiry traffic related to Halden into a black hole server that hadn't been touched in 16 years. The IP source was internal. Someone inside Horvath's executive circle was actively obstructing the investigation. The doors opened onto the 72nd floor, Executive Strategy Suite. The conference room was massive, walled with glass that overlooked Manhattan's skyline. 8 senior directors already sat at the curved obsidian table, their expressions ranging from irritated to concerned. As Maya entered, the air changed. Every head turned, some with subtle respect, others with restrained contempt. All knew who she was, the heir to the founder. The hidden card returned from exile. Maya placed her tablet at the head of the table and didn't sit. "We've been breached," she said without preamble. Aegis traced a suppression algorithm rerouting all metadata tied to Project Halden and early-era founder activity. It originated from this building. There was a long silence. Then Director Vaughn leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation," Maya replied. "It's a fact. And we have the server hash to prove it." She tapped her tablet. A 3-dimensional data map projected mid-air, nodes of internal data flow, with one pulsing red link descending from Level 72 Core Suite 3B. Director Lean, Horvath's CFO, narrowed her eyes. "That suite's access is restricted to high-clearance security, meaning only this room has the authority to grant root permissions." "Exactly," Maya said. "Which means the breach didn't come from a rogue coder or outdated system. It came from someone with authority." She paused. "One of you." The room went still. No one moved. No one dared speak first. The data floating above the table flickered again as Maya highlighted packet timestamps, code echo, origin point, and a command string ending in a unique signature, DVR. Director Vaughn shifted, eyes narrowing. That could be spoofed. A misdirection. "We've seen synthetic tags used before, not this one," Maya interrupted. "This tag links back to a dormant credential embedded into our compliance node. Its legacy pre-split. The only person who's ever used a DVR tag in our internal system architecture is sitting in this room. Director Vern Delacroix, Senior Operations Officer. He flinched, only slightly, but Maya caught it. The others hadn't noticed. But she had trained her entire life to read micro-expressions. Vern spoke calmly, but there was a strain underneath. You're suggesting I accessed a classified server without clearance? That I rewrote legacy code and buried an internal investigation? That's outrageous. Maya stared at him, eyes steady. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating it. You've been intercepting queries linked to R.J. Halden for years. You were there in 2005 on site in Virginia, consulting on the facility that never existed. You filed false receipts, routed them through shell vendors, and erased shipment manifests. That's obstruction at minimum. At worst, co-conspiracy. The table broke into murmurs. Delacroix stood abruptly. This is political theater. She has no authority to accuse anyone in this room. On the contrary, Veer said, stepping forward. Colonel Sterling has been granted emergency oversight under Directive 9. Her authority supersedes yours in all matters involving historic founder security breaches. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper, firm and lethal. You're not just a liability, Vern. You're the reason Halden died. Delacroix's face hardened. You have no proof. Not yet, Maya replied. But the aegis is compiling it now. Your systems are flagged. Your communications monitored. The moment we tie your financial trail to that black site ledger, I will drag your name through every court from The Hague to DC. This is madness, he snapped. This company was built by people willing to make hard choices. You wouldn't exist without them. Maya didn't blink. And yet here I am, about to dismantle everything they corrupted. Director Lean turned. You knew about the facility? It wasn't my operation, Delacroix said. But I was told it was necessary. That Halden was going to fracture the company before it even stabilized. He wanted to split it, sell off the digital infrastructure, create oversight. He wanted to protect the vision, Maya said, not weaponize it. Security agents entered the room at Veer's silent signal. Delacroix backed away. You don't understand what you're doing. No, Maya said, eyes cold. You don't understand what you destroyed. As Delacroix was escorted out, Maya turned back to the board. We are no longer compromised. Any department head found obstructing this investigation will face the same consequences. She paused, scanning their faces. If you knew what happened and stayed silent, this is your last chance to come forward. Inside, Maya sat in silence across from Veer, her fingers steepled beneath her chin, eyes locked on a small data slate displaying a single name in bold. Ellis Rourke alias. Thomas Grayson location. Deerfield Ridge, Pop. 112. Coordinates triangulated by Aegis Node 9 using 3 disconnected utility bills and a shadow purchase of medical supplies traced through a secondary pharmacy chain. Maya had given the order herself. Rourke was the last confirmed link to Halden's final days, the only man still alive who might have seen what Halden tried to expose before it was buried. As the jet taxied to a stop, a waiting convoy of nondescript SUVs rumbled to life from beneath camo tarps near the tree-line. Maya stepped out first, the cold air biting against her skin, her boots crunching against frozen gravel as she climbed into the lead vehicle. The drive through the woods was long, winding through switchbacks and stretches of untouched wilderness. The world out here didn't move fast. It didn't chase power, which was exactly why Rourke had come. At 11:07 a.m., they pulled onto a dirt road that led to a weathered cabin built into the side of a ridge, camouflaged by age and silence. No visible cameras, no satellite dish, but the aegis scanner pinged a low-level defense field. Motion tripwires, heat sensors, old tech, but methodical. Maya stepped out alone, holding a black envelope marked with the Horvath seal. Veer stayed back. She knew better than to interfere in this kind of meeting. Maya approached the door and knocked once, then twice, then once again, a pattern once used in old Horvath internal dispatch. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a man in his 70s, lean but wiry, eyes sharp despite the years. His beard was thick, gray, and unkempt. His flannel shirt hung loose, but his posture was that of someone who'd never truly let his guard down. "Whatever you're selling," he muttered, "I'm not buying." "I'm not here to sell anything," Maya replied. "I'm here because of Halden." The name stopped him. His gaze locked onto hers like a switch had been flipped. "You need to leave." "He trusted you," Maya said evenly. "And now I need to understand why he disappeared, and who made that decision." Rourke's jaw flexed. "That was a long time ago. Long enough it should have stayed buried." "That's not your call," Maya said. "Not anymore." She stepped inside, uninvited. Rourke didn't stop her. The cabin was cluttered, but not chaotic. Shelves of books, old tech gear, a ham radio rig. Maya set the envelope down on the table and opened it, sliding out a faded photo. 3 men stood shoulder to shoulder, Halden in the middle, smiling. Her father to the left, Rourke on the right. The corner was marked in pen, Charlottesville Hub, June '04. Rourke's breath hitched as he stared at it. "Where did you get that?" "From my father's archive," Maya said. "He kept it in a classified pocket inside his private vault. I think he wanted me to find it." Rourke shook his head, backing up. "You don't understand. We didn't just work on logistics. We buried the contingency, and then they turned it into something else. I left because I knew if I stayed, I'd be next." Maya stepped closer. "So tell me, what was the contingency?" Rourke turned, his voice hollow. Halden knew someone was rewriting the core directive. It wasn't just about money. They were building backdoors, intelligence-grade code that could be sold, used to leverage governments. He found the access strings, traced them, but he didn't have time to go public. So he encrypted everything he had onto a mobile drive. Custom housing, triple-layer encryption, analog pulse kill switch. No cloud storage, no trace. He called it the relay. "Where is it?" Maya asked. Rourke shook his head. "I don't know. He never told me. Said it was safer if none of us knew. That way, they couldn't extract it by force. All I know is, he gave it to someone he trusted. Could have been a courier, a technician, maybe even someone inside your family." Maya felt a cold, knot twist in her stomach. "Do you remember any names? Anyone he was close to near the end?" Rourke thought for a long moment, then whispered. He kept talking about Vault 7. Said the key wasn't digital. It was blood. Maya's eyes narrowed. That phrase, it wasn't metaphor. In Horvath's biometric system, blood referred to generational encryption, DNA-based access. "You're saying the drive can only be unlocked by family?" "Maybe," Rourke said. "But if that's true, then you're already closer to it than anyone else." He paused, his shoulders sagging under the weight of years. Halden didn't just die. He was erased. And the people who did it, they're not done. If you go after them, they'll come after you. Maya stepped back toward the door. "Let them." As she exited, Rourke called after her. "If you find it, the relay, don't try to use it. It's not a weapon. It's proof. That's what makes it dangerous." She nodded once and stepped into the snow, the cold forgotten. Because now the game had shifted again. They weren't just hunting Martin. They weren't just exposing corruption. They were chasing the one thing everyone thought was gone, a hard drive buried in silence, carrying a truth so powerful it had to be hidden in blood. The rotor blades of the Black Ops chopper cut through the early dawn sky, like a predator stalking low over the desert sands. Maya sat strapped into the rear compartment, her body still, her mind in overdrive as the digital blueprint flickered on the screen before her. Aegis Node 03 had just decrypted the final layer of Halden's legacy encryption embedded in a forgotten subroutine labeled Vault 7, Equinox. The coordinates pointed to an abandoned Horvath research facility outside Los Alamos, New Mexico, decommissioned 12 years ago, officially listed as inactive for restructuring, yet still drawing a minuscule amount of power through a hidden substation under a different grid name. That power draw was the clue, the anomaly, the heartbeat. And in a world built on silence, a heartbeat meant something was alive. Agent Veer sat beside her, armored up, eyes locked on a side monitor, streaming live thermal feeds of the compound. No surface activity yet. But a second chopper, unmarked, silent, likely mercenary, had been pinged by satellite 23 minutes ago en route from Texas. Someone else had followed the trail. Maya leaned forward, addressing the pilot. "Put us down 1 click east. We'll go in from a blind ridge." The pilot nodded, banking hard as the sunrise lit the desert in burnt orange and blood-red shadows. The facility came into view, a crumbling cluster of concrete and steel half buried in the earth like a sunken tomb. Its entrance collapsed, overgrown with scrub and sand, but beneath it, layers still intact. She could feel it. This was where Halden had left it. The team moved quickly once they hit the ground. Aegis ground units had already surveyed the exterior hours earlier and flagged a collapsed elevator shaft on the east side as the only viable entry point. Maya descended first, rappelling through the darkness with practiced speed, Veer and 2 agents following close behind. The shaft opened into a corridor long, untouched by light, the air thick with dust and chemical residue. Old terminals lined the walls, powered down, dead. But the moment Maya stepped into the hallway, her wristband blinked. A biometric pulse reader, coded to family lineage, had recognized her DNA signature. The hallway lights flickered once, then turned on, slowly, deliberately. "It knows you're here," Veer said under her breath. Maya didn't reply. She was already moving. They passed through reinforced blast doors that opened without resistance, guided by old biometric locks now reawakened. They descended deeper, 5 levels underground, until they reached a pressure-sealed vault door with no keypad, only scanner. Maya stepped forward and placed her hand flat against the plate. A soft pulse registered, then another. A final chirp echoed in the chamber, and the vault hissed open, revealing a narrow chamber lined with data cores, dormant servers, and, at the very end, a single pedestal with a black casing the size of a shoebox. No labels, no markings. But Maya knew it was the relay. The room hummed with tension as she approached, reaching for the device. Gunfire erupted from the shaft above, short, suppressed bursts. Aegis agents ducked, drawing weapons. "We've got hostiles," Veer shouted, already flanking the hallway as shadowed figures dropped into the chamber. Mercenaries, black-suited, faceless, behind tactical visors, weapons drawn. Maya grabbed the relay and ducked behind the pedestal as bullets ricocheted off the reinforced walls. The first wave was fast but sloppy, expecting an unguarded retrieval. They didn't expect resistance. Maya gave the relay to Veer. "Protect it, no matter what." "What about you?" "I'm going to buy us 10 minutes. Maya surged forward, using cover and memory of the corridor's angles to outmaneuver the attackers. She disabled the first one with a precise blow to the neck, grabbed his weapon mid-drop, and returned fire. 1 merc fell, then 2. But more were coming. She heard radio chatter in a language not meant for casual decoding, Serbo-Croatian, filtered through tactical slang. Professionals, not local hires. These men were sent by someone who knew exactly what the relay meant. Veer and the agents secured the device in a shockproof case and began retreating down the alternate tunnel mapped earlier by Aegis drones. Maya covered them, moving like liquid through the dark, cutting angles, forcing the enemy into choke points. Her ribs ached from a near miss, but she kept moving. At one point, she came face to face with a lead operator, taller than the others, wearing insignia she didn't recognize. They fought hand to hand in the narrow corridor, fists and elbows colliding like iron on iron. He was stronger. She was faster. And when she finally slammed his head into the wall and knocked him out cold, she pulled his comms unit and whispered into it. "Tell whoever sent you. They're already too late." Veer's voice buzzed in her earpiece. "We're clear. Secondary extraction point secured. 2 minutes until evac." Maya didn't answer. She was already climbing back toward the shaft, every movement a calculation, every breath a countdown. As she emerged into the dawn light, the second chopper approached, this one marked with Aegis clearance. Reinforcements. The battle wasn't over, but the relay was safe, for now. Inside the chopper, Maya held the case in her lap, staring at its surface. It didn't glow. It didn't hum. It was just cold metal. But inside it was the truth Halden had died protecting. And now it was in the hands of the one person who had the right blood to unlock it. The walls of the core nexus pulsed with dim amber light as Maya stood alone before the heart of Wacth Holdings, an obelisk-like server array rising through the center of the operations tower like a silent judge, watching, recording, remembering. The relay rested in her hands, its matte casing now connected by a reinforced fiber channel to the primary interface node, locked, dormant, silent. Around her, the system hummed with low energy, waiting for the signal. Agent Veer and the Aegis operatives stood behind a blast door, watching through reinforced glass as Maya approached the biometric platform embedded into the floor. Every protocol had been cleared, every firewall dismantled, and yet what she was about to do had never been attempted. Because Relay wasn't just a hard drive, it was a final act of trust, and only Halden's blood could complete it. Maya stepped onto the platform and placed her palm on the scanner. A thin beam of red light swept over her skin, followed by a prick, a microscopic needle extracting the genetic signature coded into her very cells. A soft chime echoed. Then a second prompt appeared. Voice recognition. Phrase required. Maya exhaled slowly and spoke the phrase her father once whispered to her during a thunderstorm when she was 8 years old and afraid of the dark. The truth remembers, even when they don't. The scanner blinked blue, then green, then gold. The casing of the relay hissed, unfolding like a mechanical flower, revealing a core of luminous glass. Inside flickered rows of encrypted memory strands, data etched in light, memory, and blood. The core nexus reacted instantly. One by one, dormant servers roared to life. Streams of code raced across the tower systems. Security locks dropped. Screens across Wacth's global offices lit up simultaneously. The Aegis network precinct received mirrored feeds. Every analyst, every node, every partner. The relay had connected, and it was broadcasting. Maya watched as decades of suppressed data poured out. Transcripts, whistleblower memos, encryption key histories, shadow payments, internal recordings. A video played first. Grainy footage. Halden, sitting in the Vault 7 chamber, speaking directly into a lens. "If you're seeing this," he said, "then I didn't make it. And if I didn't make it, it means someone decided the truth was more dangerous than the lie. They'll tell you I disappeared, that I broke protocol, that I lost my way. But what I really did was remember who we were supposed to be." His voice was steady, but his eyes carried fatigue. Wacth wasn't built to dominate. It was built to protect access, freedom of information. We weren't supposed to turn intelligence into leverage. But someone changed the code. Someone inside. And if that code lives on, so does the lie. More clips followed. Audio logs of secret meetings, Delacroix's voice among them. Financial spreadsheets showing bribes, illegal transfers. The cover-up of Halden's death logged as an off-record field accident, signed off by names Maya had once trusted. Her father's notes appeared next. Digital diary entries, private reflections, fears he never voiced aloud. In one he wrote, "I fear I've built a kingdom of glass. Beautiful, fragile, and already cracked from within." The final segment was a list. Names. Dozens of them. People who had tried to speak, who had been silenced, reassigned, ruined. The relay had recorded them all. Preserved them. Maya didn't hesitate. She issued a global override from her personal keycode and pushed the feed live to every Wacth system connected worldwide, every investor dashboard, every employee login, every public interface. Then, through a redundant backup, she routed the stream to international media networks, bypassing delay buffers. And in one breath, the truth went viral. Across continents, executives gasped. News anchors interrupted broadcasts mid-sentence. Government liaisons scrambled as the history of a billion-dollar empire unraveled in real time. The world watched as the deception fell apart piece by piece, laid bare by a woman who refused to be erased. Some tried to stop the feed. They failed. Aegis had already deployed decoys and logic bombs to keep the signal alive for 48 hours across thousands of mirrors. By then, it wouldn't matter. The lie was broken. Behind her, Veer entered the chamber, her voice quiet with awe. "You did it." Maya's gaze remained fixed on the screen. "No, Halden did. I just made sure he was heard." "What happens now?" Veer asked. Maya turned. Her voice was calm, but final. "Now they rebuild. With truth at the foundation, not secrets." She removed the relay from the interface. The data, already duplicated, irreversible. She held it like a relic, not of power, but of sacrifice. Of what it cost to preserve integrity in a world that traded it for convenience. As they exited the Nexus, a sunrise broke over Manhattan, warm and wide, gilding the tower with light. For the first time in 20 years, Wacth Holdings stood under no shadow. The board would be purged. Investigations would follow. Trials would begin. But none of it would change the fact that history had been rewritten, not with code, but with courage. And in the silence that followed, the world remembered. The end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next one. What did you think about the twist with the relay? Did you expect Ellis Rourke to break his silence? And what would you have done in Maya's place? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where in the world you're watching from.